All right. Thank you, Dr. Landry, for being here. And I'm just wondering if you can introduce yourself, give us a bit of your background, and how did you end up doing research here in your field?
Yes, thank you for the invitation. I'm David Landry, and I'm an assistant professor since 2022 at the Interdisciplinary School of Health Science in the Faculty of Health Sciences at University of Ottawa. I am the principal investigator of my research lab in reproduction, endocrinology, cancer research. We actually call it the REC Research Lab. Uh, I have a background, an academic background. I've completed my bachelor degrees in science with a specialization in biology at the Université de Moncton in New Brunswick. At that point, I was, as an undergrad student, I was really interested in everything of the stem cells, of the plasticity of stem cells, how cells can become everything, how embryo can become a human, right? So, all those kind of signaling pathways and things like that. So I followed a lot of courses into stem cells, into embryogenesis, reproductive field. And following my bachelor, I had a great opportunity to do a master study under the supervision of Luc Martin into the male reproductive field. So basically, it was close enough to what I like to do and decided to explore that field of male reproduction. So I studied the impact of obesity, which includes hormones produced by the adipose tissue, such as leptin, adiponectin, and resistin, into the male steroidogenesis or the testosterone production, the sex hormones production. So at that stage, I actually realized that research is really fun to do. Uh, it's a great opportunity to discover new things, new research, new faces of things that people have never seen before, and yet to publish those data, to be involved in these new advance of our medical understanding of these field, and even to create better treatments or understand the underlying foundation of treatments and disease. So I also realized during my master that infertility was a big problem in our modern society, and how much the environment may impact it as well. So I, knew about the male side during my master, and I decided that I want to pursue into a PhD and to discover a little bit more about the female side. So I decided to do a PhD at the Université Laval in Quebec City under the supervision of Marc-André Sirard, which is the first one who did a cow in vitro, into the female side of fertility, on the impact of ovarian stimulation, into the quality of the eggs in women or female. So funny enough, we work with the cow model, in the dairy cow model, which is a really good model for human ovarian stimulation because it is quite similar. So my PhD was basically an industrial PhD with one of the biggest, the largest industry of cow fertility in the world, Bovitech, in which we characterize the different type of ovarian stimulation in cows and how they lead to better oocyte quality or egg quality. And with that knowledge, I created a diagnosis tool that allows us to improve the ovarian stimulation in cows, which is actually really funny because it sets the foundation to, creating those opportunities in human or fertility clinics. So another big thing about my PhD is that I had many great opportunity to create my own project, create my own designs, my own idea to follow up on bioinformatics and large data sets. Our students, so I supervised many students during my PhD, in which I really realized that, I like being a supervisor. I like working in the lab. I like, designing my own projects. So that's the point where I decided that I want to become a principal investigator. I want to have my own research lab. I want to have my students, my projects, and working in the field. So with that said, I decided to pursue into a postdoc here at the University of Ottawa at the OHRI, which is the Ottawa Hospital Research Institute, under the supervision of Dr. Barbara van der Eyden, in which I had two main projects, one in female infertility associated with mutations, and one in ovarian cancer, in which we were, to understand how we can prevent ovarian cancer. And briefly, that's a really interesting topic because it sees my interest into the cancer field, at least in the reproductive cancers, is we discovered that aging women have more ovarian fibrosis in their ovaries, and this may be one of the underlying causes of increased ovarian cancer risk as the women age. And we discovered too that, by treating these women with a common drug such as metformin, which is a common drug for diabetes, we were able to reduce or prevent ovarian fibrosis. And thus we believe that maybe treating women with metformin reduce ovarian fibrosis and reduce the risk of ovarian cancer. So obviously there's a lot of more works to be done to understand fully the role of metformin into ovarian fibrosis, or even the role of ovarian fibrosis into ovarian cancer. But this is basically how I became interested in the fields of reproduction, endocrinology, and in the field of reproductive cancers, as I'm building my own research projects or plans around those topics and other various reproductive conditions and disease, such as PCOS, the polycystic ovarian syndrome, but at a different type of level, at the molecular level, to understand the mechanistics of these disease.
That's definitely an interesting pathway from, where you're starting off to where you've been now. You can really see the progression and how you kind of use all of your different academic background fields to kind of get where you are now. I found it really interesting when you mentioned the environmental toxins and how that can affect, and how we're seeing an increase of endocrine disorders. I've also seen, just around in the media and in the literature that we are seeing really high prevalence of that. So I think this research now is really important, right? With all of the incidences and prevalence of it. So it's definitely a really cool aspect of your research. In your postdoc, when you were speaking about that, you also mentioned some projects you were doing with the metformin. I was wondering if you might want to go into some of your current ongoing research projects that you're currently doing in your lab.
Yes, of course. I have various projects that are in structure or in designs. I have many projects that involves, different generations of women and how the disease or the condition are transmitted between generations. And those projects are in designs, but I also have a couple of projects that are ongoing at this moment. First, we are looking at the developmental origin of PCOS, the polycystic ovarian syndrome, and how it can be transmitted from generation to generations. And in fact, how it is triggered in women and how we can prevent it to be triggered or transmitted. So this is part of my DOAD project, DOAD being the developmental origin of health and disease. We are looking how we can treat PCOS, how we can prevent PCOS of being transmitted, and how we can understand how this endocrine disorder, which involve a lot of high level production of androgen, can be treated or reduced in women. So we, or interestingly, we are investigating some literature we found that are proposing that some of the phytocannabinoids, which are part of the cannabis plant, may regulate the production of sex hormones. And we are investigating if that phytocannabinoids or other phytocannabinoids may be used as a potential treatment for androgen production. So we're looking into treating cells or mice with phytocannabinoids and register and look into the production of hormones to see if we can use that as a treatment for PCOS. We are also interested into the involvement of fibrosis or fibroblasts during fibrosis and specific genes expression. So in the previous study that I did as my postdoc, we identify a panel of genes that are extremely interesting and has great potential, and we're following up on these genes to make sure to understand the mechanistics of these genes during fibrosis production, including in ovarian fibrosis production. And finally, we have some recent literature that also pointed the potential therapeutic effect of phytocannabinoid on ovarian cancer progression, and as a sensibilizer to chemo agents. So we discovered by using single cell sequencing that ovarian tumors or mouse ovarian tumors cell line in a petri dish don't express any of the marker of the endocannabinoid system, but once they're injected in the mice in vitro, in vivo, they acquire those receptors, so they become capable of responding to phytocannabinoids. And this opens a lot of new doors to understand how phytocannabinoids can be used to treat ovarian cancer, or even to sensitize the cells to chemotherapy, or even to modulate the microenvironment, which is the environment in which the tumor grow in it. So we can really focus, or we're focusing on that work at the moment. So we're treating mice with phytocannabinoid and injecting ovarian cancer, and then we'll look at the progression of it and see if we can treat the cells, the mice, with chemo agents, and if it increased their survival in the long term.
Very interesting. Yeah, those are really cool different projects you've got going on. For those of us who aren't too familiar with it, can you touch more on what a phytocannabinoid is? I know you mentioned it was part of the plant, but how does it interact with the body?
That's a great question. A phytocannabinoid, it's a cannabinoid. It's the part of the cannabis plant that we consume, or people can consume using the cannabis or oil or various other method of ingestion. However, what's interesting is that a phytocannabinoid is capable of interacting with our endogen system, which is called the endocannabinoid system. It was discovered a little while ago by exactly understanding the effect of cannabis on the human body. We discovered that we have an endogen system that respond to it, but we have also an endogen system that we call the endocannabinoids, that are actually produced by our body, produced by our cells, that regulate or keep our body in a perfect homeostasis. So that phytocannabinoid, the term phyto means that it's coming from a plant. So phytocannabinoid means it's the plant cannabis sativa that is, interacting with our system we call the endocannabinoid system. We also have the endocannabinoids, which are the one produced by our neurons, produced by our cells, that can interact within our own body to maintain homeostasis. And we have what we call the synthetic cannabinoid system, which are molecules, drugs that we produce in the lab that can interact with our body in a similar way as other phytocannabinoid. If I talk about phytocannabinoid, you're probably going to remember or think of the most common one, such as THC, right? Which is the psychedelic one that makes, mind bending a little bit. And then there's the other one, such as CBD, which is another one well known, and it's the one that we're focusing the most in our research. What's interesting about CBD, it's a well tolerated phytocannabinoid that has no psychoactive effect, and has been shown to have really good potential effect into the body. So we're looking into combination of CBDs and other type of phytocannabinoid without excluding THC, but into the body, into the effect of ovarian cancer and steroidogenesis.
Interesting. Yeah, it's really cool hearing about the link between the phytocannabinoids and the androgen system, because we know, obviously, with your research and PCOS and different types of reproductive endocrinology fields, having that increased amount of testosterone is, a big factor of it, right? So seeing the link kind of makes things a bit more clear in the field. So that's definitely really cool. So with your research, do you have a specific like outcome or hope that you're, hoping that you can see from this? Or is it more observatory in the sense where you just kind of want to see what happens with the combination of these two aspects?
It's a great question, because we could compare it to a ladder, right? We have to understand first and then go to the next step and then apply like option, the therapeutic option. So obviously in our lab, we are research in reproductive endocrinology, cancer, in the health science field. So we are looking at two main objectives in my research and our research. It's basically better treatment and better quality of life. So in ovarian cancer is known to be a silent killer, because unfortunately it is usually diagnosed at a later stage when treatment is less effective. So we're hoping that with our research using phytocannabinoid, we may improve the sensibility of chemotherapies on its own, or reduce ovarian cancer progression and extend the survival or even the quality of life in women using that treatment. So obviously we need to understand first what's going on, if it works and how it works, and then how we can apply it to women without altering, other essential physiological pathways or function in the body. Um, into the other aspect of my research in PCOS, which it's a big one of the main source of infertility in women. It also brings a lot of complication in women's life, which are associated with higher level of androgen, sex hormones or male sex hormone that shouldn't be expressed in women as that levels. So we are hoping to identify new therapeutic options that we can use in these women that are affected by PCOS to kind of manage the production of androgen using those phytocannabinoids. So we are hoping to understand what is happening at the basic level, at the fundamental level, and then if it works, and we see like great response, then we could go into clinical trial and see if we can use a combination of CBDs at the minimum level that would effectively work to reduce the production of androgen and give those women a better quality of life, a better normal quality of life, and hopefully also increasing their fertility in the long term.
Yeah, those are definitely really interesting possibilities of having clinical implications of research. I know for a lot of people that's definitely, something they really hope to achieve, because at the end of the day, you want to see all this hard work you're doing and have some meaning and really make an impact in people's lives. So that's really nice to see, yeah, that there are those options for people. And I think this one, with talking about PCOS, it's really important too and impactful, I think, because infertility is such a heartbreaking side effect and symptom, right? So it really devastates the lives of so many, and knowing that there's a possibility to change that must be, super really drives the motivation to do this kind of stuff, right? So I think that's great. So in doing this research and carrying it out and coming up with your plans, and have you ever encountered any problems or challenges that you might want to speak about?
It's a great question as well. In fact, I'm a young investigator, so I'm still learning all the steps and everything in research and all the challenges and the problems. But what I want to mention, we really lucky at the University of Ottawa because there's a really great structure that helps young investigator navigating through those problems, to those challenges. Obviously, like when we do a research or medical research, we have a lot of red tapes here and there, and that we shouldn't be crossing. And then we have a really great group or team that will help us, like such as the finance, the grant teams, or even the animal ethic teams that can make sure that our projects are well designed and well prepared prior to starting them, right? So we working like in my research, it's like most research, it involves the use of animals model to study effects that we may see in human. And as a researcher, we want to make sure that there's no, suffering that at any point in our experiments, that the animals are well treated, well behaved, and well suited to our experiment. So we're working really closely with veterinarians, with the ethical boards, and the whole team at the animal care facility to make sure that our projects are really strong and are really well suited for the animal, to keep them well being and without suffering. So this is one of the a big challenge that we have to do, is to make sure that we minimize the suffering in our animals, but yet increase the relevance of our models to achieve what we're looking for.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely a good point too, because I know when we were speaking last time, you had mentioned that trying to get a hold of animal models like mice is really challenging, especially for a new researcher, because you don't have that background to show that, you're not going to do anything malicious with them. You're just trying to carry out your research. So that's definitely another like challenge that you wouldn't initially think of, I think, when it comes to research, but it just all those hidden kind of doors you have to kind of go through, right? So yeah. Another question for you. Given the recent kind of boom, I think, in different reproductive endocrinology, the field of research, what about yours would you say is unique and different from what's already been out there? What makes this so special?
It's that's awesome, because it's a little bit part of why we are researching and why we are trying to not reinvent the wheel, but add, like, to the wheel. So my research, what makes it a little bit different from the other one, or even from my field, it's really the fact that we're trying to use the phytocannabinoids into treatment. So most of the studies out there will be looking into the effect of overconsumption, right? So what's happening, what's bad happening about it, and they will be looking at combination of drugs that include the psychedelic one. But in my project, we are looking at the non-psychedelic options of phytocannabinoids such as CBD or other CBA, CBC, and other type of phytocannabinoids, because there's a lot of different phytocannabinoids that we don't even know yet what they do. And those drugs have been used for thousands and thousands of years in civilization to treat disease and to treat conditions, including reproductive problems. It is, in the literature that ancient civilization were using CBD or cannabis to treat fertility problems. So this is really interesting because we're looking at the possible therapeutic options of these drugs into a controlled manner that may help us manage disease and or cancer. So this is what makes my research a little bit interesting, because we're looking at things that have not been done yet. So there's no research that shows the effect of phytocannabinoid on female reproduction. There's no research showing the effect of phytocannabinoid in ovarian cancer progression in vivo. Most of the studies has been done in vitro, showing an effect, but then they stop there, and we're taking over the in vitro portion of it to investigate if those effects are indeed what we see in vitro and are from potential for therapeutic options.
Right, yeah. I think that kind of aspect of this research as well is really interesting, especially given that we're in Canada, right, where these products are, maybe not at the same medicinal level, but they're still widely available to Canadians, right, over the age of 19. So not looking at the psychedelic effects necessarily, but looking at the medicinal effects of some of the ingredients and the kind of effects that can have on these different things, especially, reproductive disorders, I think is going to be a really interesting field to look into, especially as we go on with this research, just because of the exposure that most Canadians have to these things, and they're so accessible, right? So I think if we're going to be, letting people have wide access to this, it would be really important and maybe interesting to kind of see the results they have, not necessarily just, like you're talking about the psychedelic, but how this impacts people on, just an overall general health level, right?
Yes.
So yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me about this. It was really interesting kind of going over your research and how you got here and what might be the future for the field. So thank you again for your time.
It was a pleasure.